This episode is proudly supported by Westholme Australian Wagyu. Whether you're a chef or just love going to restaurants, you know the best ingredients are everything, especially when it comes to beef. Westholme, based in Queensland and the Northern Territory, Australia, is working with the land to create nature-led Australian Wagyu. They steward 16 million acres of rangeland, guided by the natural ecosystem where cattle graze and forage on native grasses for the first few years of their lives. The result is high-quality Wagyu beef that reflects the terroir of Northern Australia. Westholme believe that when nature leads, flavour follows. Learn more at westholme.com.
I think it's an ethical and moral decision that you pay your bills, you pay your staff, you pay their super, and you pay the tax. I think ultimately if businesses aren't, and if enough businesses aren't, the system isn't working. And it creates, an unlevel playing field in a way.
Hey everybody, it is Dani Valent with you for another episode of Dirty Linen. So happy to have you with us today. Today we're talking about different ways of getting into hospitality and the way that this wonderful world of food, bars, restaurants, cafes can strike a person. Our guest is Catherine Gibson Roy. Catherine is the owner of We3, a bar in Sydney's Inner West. Catherine is the co-owner of this bar. She owns it with her daughter, Alli, who is a hospitality lifer. Catherine, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thanks, Dani.
Great to have you on the show. For people who haven't been to We3, give us a little rundown on what it is and who you look after there.
Okay, so as you said, we're in the Inner West in Sydney, in Marrickville. We're classified as a small bar, but as a small bar, we're actually quite big. We've got 120 capacity, which is the maximum you can have in New South Wales as a small bar. We're across every building with 2 stories, so it brings with it a lot of challenges as well as a lot of opportunities. We really have set up to be a local venue. For people who don't know the Inner West of Sydney but might be familiar with Melbourne, you'd be thinking sort of that Brunswick, Coburg type area. So while we might get a few people travelling from outside the area, really, if we don't cater to the locals, we're not going to have a customer base. So I like to think of us as sort of accessible, not cheap and cheerful, maybe a step up from cheap and cheerful, but accessible, affordable, and relaxing for people to come and hang out.
I love that. There is nothing that makes a person feel so anchored in a community than a small bar, just as you described. So, they're really important spaces. Now, Catherine, I sort of touched on this in the intro, but you have not been working in hospitality for very long. Your daughter, however, has. Give us a little rundown of your varied career.
Alrighty, so straight out of school, I decided to study acting, which was probably just a phase. I then got very serious quickly and went into an accounting degree, and from there fell into the public health system in Victoria and worked in a lot of the major hospitals in varying roles around planning, strategy, management. I then hopped out of that and started a business with somebody else, running a building design and project management business, and we focused a lot on sustainable design in the residential area in particular in Melbourne. And then due to circumstance, the business was closed and I relocated to Sydney, which is where I actually grew up. And I bounced around a little bit when I got to Sydney. I didn't really know what to do with myself, but ended up becoming a swim teacher and swim coach, which I've done for many years and love and hope to return to one day. So that's kind of my varied career.
And I think you snuck an MBA in along the way, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, I did do an MBA. When I was in the public health sector in Victoria, I was very career-oriented and very, I suppose, success-driven and climbing a certain public sector corporate ladder. And I did the MBA as part of that phase of my life. I don't regret doing it. It still has brought a range of skills that I use even in a small business.
I'm sure it does, and we can touch on that in a bit. But so you had your daughter Alli, I guess, pretty young, and Alli was a different person to you, and really fell into hospitality and found her calling there. How did that all strike you?
Yeah, so she is and has always been very different to me in terms of what she values. I loved going to school. I loved education. I loved studying. I grew up without a lot of money, and that seemed to me to be the way to, get money, I suppose, was to be smart and get a good job. She was always driven by other things, more mercurial things and people and fun times. And she did okay at school, but she really didn't want to study further after that. And she had a part-time job in a deli in Brunswick in Melbourne. And one day I just said to her, this isn't life. Like, you can't just have a part-time job. If you've left school, you need to get a plan. And she fell into hospitality because a mate was doing a traineeship somewhere and she went along with him. And she's never left it. And she's done all kinds of things with it, worked for all kinds of people, travelled the world with it. And she still loves it. She's in her mid-30s and I don't think she can imagine doing anything else.
Catherine, a lot of parents watch their kids get into hospitality and, let's say, have concerns. What was your journey to appreciating what Alli does?
I think just watching it. She lived at home until she was nearly 21. So it was a couple of years there where she started out in hospitality, and so we're still living at home. And she worked really long hours and she worked really weird hours, and she came home with strange stories. I mean, her first full-time job was in the casino in Melbourne, on the floor delivering drinks to people who are gambling at 2 a.m. And it's an unusual part of life and the world for a young person to, I suppose, witness and be part of. But she found energy to do it. And she was obviously good at it and moved more into operations around conferencing very quickly. And that obviously was, I suppose, air commas, a nicer role. And she was just very settled with it. And so for me, I was, I suppose, relieved that she'd found something that she enjoyed going to every day. At that point in her life, I don't think she even knew that it's what she would always do. But there was a very clear moment in my life. I'd gone to a party and there were old uni mates there, and there was the usual, what's Alli up to? And she was probably in her mid-20s by then and doing yet another job somewhere in a bar in Melbourne. And I said, she's running this bar in Melbourne. And they're like, oh, she's still that, And this person said to me, she'll find her way one day. And I just said, I think she's found it. Like, I think this is what she does. And I was actually quite proud in that moment that was what she did.
I love that. And so fast forward, you're running a bar together. I mean, how did that actually come about?
So, she, like I said, she's in her mid-30s. She'd come back from Canada when she was about 30 and talked a lot about wanting to run her own thing. And, I think you get to an age, if you've worked in hospitality, that you either get out or you want to have a go at doing your own thing. And she came back and she settled down. She, found the man of her dreams and settled into a bit more of a regular lifestyle and was saving money. And I just hit a point in my life where it was like, well, I've got money and I've got time and I'm not really doing anything as much as I love the swim coaching. It was like, why not? I'm getting too old that if we're ever going to do it together, that it has to be now. And so I just said to her, are you still serious? Do you have any money of your own that you can put up? And do you want to give it a go? And she said yes. And that's how it happened.
So you obviously brought, pretty different skills and experience to it. What did you bring to the process and what did you notice Alli was really good at?
So the process of opening or the process of planning it, I think, look, if you're a big corporate hospitality business, obviously you have this in-house. But when you're small and you're starting out, I think probably a lot of people in hospitality may not have the sort of systematic approach to planning out a business. So I made her write a business plan. We wrote a vision and mission statement. We did a SWOT analysis. I built a spreadsheet model so we could do scenario planning on revenues and costs. And it all seemed, I think, to her at the time as kind of a bit of a waste of time. But it's given us at an early stage a really good handle on costs and revenues, and the planning around the vision and the mission and what we wanted out of it, I think has meant we've been able to hang on to the product as we've seen it. When you open, everybody wants to tell you what you should do and how you should do it and how it could be better. And I think if you don't have that really strong sense of what it is you're trying to deliver, it would be very easy to get dragged away from it. What she brought obviously was just a very concrete idea of how to open something. Like if you're not doing it with somebody from hospitality, I think you would stuff up so many things, like how to connect beer taps, how to clean them, how to stock a fridge, how much to order, all of the little things that go together every day to make it open and look like it's seamless. I think if you hadn't been doing it for a number of years and at a particular level, you would struggle to get that right.
And what have you learnt from Alli as you've been doing this?
Well, everything hospitality, right? Like I've had to learn how to mix a drink, mix a cocktail. She remembers people's names. She remembers people. People walk in, and like I said, we're a local bar. And for some people, it's really important to be remembered and acknowledged. And she can remember them. She remembers their names. She remembers their dogs' names. She remembers their kids' names. And I just don't have that level. I try. But, yeah, I've learned everything, how to mix a drink, how to carry a plate, how to clear a table without dropping the cutlery, how to use a dishwasher in the kitchen. I mean, I've had to learn everything. And she's had to teach it all to me.
That must be an interesting dynamic. I mean, are you business partners, mother-daughter? How does that all work?
Oh, look, you're always mother-daughter, but we do sort of have a system and an agreement in place around when we're at work, we're at work. We've had to learn how to sideline sometimes and just go, but that's not for now. Like that's another conversation that we'll do outside of the business time. But Alli's the operations manager, and so if she wants something done a certain way, I do it. If I start to feel like maybe it's not the way it should be done or could be done, or I'd like to try something different, I'll have a conversation about that, but not until I've done it her way. And 90% of the time she's right. Of course she is. She's done it for 20 years. Of course she's right. Yeah.
You mentioned, Catherine, that, you got out the business plan and the spreadsheet and did all that kind of stuff that a lot of businesses do, but a lot of businesses don't. What are some of the things that you realised about running a hospitality business as you built it and once you opened?
Look, I did a lot of reading going into it, and so I suppose I always had that in my background around the sort of cost, revenue, your gross profit. You need to be able to unit cost a drink. You need to be able to unit cost a meal. Like if you can't do those things, you just never know where the money is or isn't in your business. And, you read everything and they say the margins are tight. In a business our size, they're so tight. Like there's very little wriggle room. Managing wastage is kind of everything. Managing like energy costs, like, don't turn on the heating and the cooling until you need to. Don't run the kitchen equipment until you need to. Every cent counts. Like 1% to us can be the difference between a holiday or not a holiday. And it's like I knew it in theory, but the reality of it is actually it's very hard. The reality of it is constant.
And I mean, Alli's experienced in hospitality, but do you think that this side of it has been a surprise for her as well?
Oh yeah, I know it has, and she has said that because she managed venues for other people, but that leaves you in a gap. You don't really understand what's missing from the operational costs. There's those other costs, those other fixed costs behind the scenes that you're not privy to potentially as a manager, and she clearly wasn't in some of the businesses that she was involved in. And I think, she worked for some operators that weren't that great. She worked for some that were and some that weren't, and so she saw a lot of what not to do. And, she took those lessons with her. But, yeah, she's been, I think, surprised that you have to be on it all the time.
And I guess, we're all watchers of hospitality businesses when we go in there and spend money. You must have a different lens on it now when you see what other people are doing and what they're charging. What kinds of things have you realised about hospitality businesses?
Or how often do I sit somewhere now and go, oh, God, they mustn't be making any money? Like you just think, oh, shit, that's hard, but then you might be there on a quiet night and they might be overstaffed, and that happens to us. We think we're going to be busy, and then for some reason, no, you just don't have anyone come in that night, and you're like, why tonight? Like, every Saturday night for the last 8 weeks has been booming. Why this Saturday night have we had a third of the people through? You don't know. So there's all that, I suppose, that I notice. It's more what I hear now, I think, around the traps, around what goes on in hospitality. And some of it's just terrible. And it's an industry, I think, that, look, it has some amazing players in it and people who do a great job, and then it has a number of people who aren't doing a great job, and I think it kind of drags the industry a little bit. And that I found really surprising, to be honest.
Well, I mean, why do you think it's important that people run businesses that are compliant, businesses that are solvent, businesses that are doing the right things?
Well, I mean, personally, it's like I think it's an ethical and moral decision that you pay your bills, you pay your staff, and you pay their super, and you pay the tax. I mean, that's, I suppose, a personal view. I think ultimately if businesses aren't, and if enough businesses aren't, the system isn't working. And it creates, an unlevel playing field in a way. So for businesses, and I've been in the industry for 9 months, and the number of stories that I hear that are consistent about people not paying the super or not paying the GST or the PAYG withholding, and that thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars that people are taking out of their business and using for other things, either themselves or propping up other bits of the business. Ultimately, it means that they can price their product at a level that doesn't meet the cost of their business. So then in comparison to someone like me that's trying to do it and cover the costs, we potentially look more expensive for the same product. And so when you stretch that out over the entire industry, it gives the consumer a skewed view of what it actually costs to deliver a product.
I mean, and how does that make you feel as a new business owner?
Oh, look, I will do what I do, and I'll do it the right way, and either we'll have a product that makes us money or we won't, and I am just I'm wired like that, I suppose, and I'll get on with it. And if it's wrong and we've made a mistake, well, we'll know that in a couple of years and so be it. What does it make me feel? I feel like so many people in the industry know that it's going on. They must, because I've only been in it for 9 months, and nobody really calls it out. And the government agencies that should be looking after compliance, the enforcement is lax. And I know I say all of this against a backdrop of a lot of businesses struggled through COVID and are probably still trying to make up that lost ground. And so I sound a bit harsh, and it's not that I don't have empathy or understanding of what some of those businesses had to survive, but that's not the whole reason why some of this stuff is occurring, I think.
And I mean, are there any regulatory or taxation or other levers that you think government at any level should pull to change the landscape, assist hospitality, make it fairer?
Oh, look, I think probably. I mean, at the local level, the stuff around planning is just anyone who's had to go through planning knows how expensive it is, how time-consuming it is. And then ongoing at local level, you know, every time they come and inspect your premises, you pay a fee. Every time you want to do anything, you pay a fee. You know, we've got a late night DA now, but it's a trial, so every 12 months I have to pay another fee to extend it. You know, it goes on and on and on. And it's only a few $100 here and there, but you add it up and you add it up. So that kind of thing at the planning level is tricky for small operators and for everybody, to be honest, but the smaller operator, I think, feels it. I know in the area I'm in, at state level, in terms of enforcement and regulation, there are a lot of bars operating under restaurant licences, and I know anyone who hears this, who knows me, will think I'm terrible, but that really, it peeves me because it's harder to run a small bar than a restaurant in terms of setting it up and cost and compliance. And those businesses are not in any way sort of forced to run as a restaurant. Everybody knows they're running as a bar and everyone just ignores it. And then I suppose federally, you know, your GST and PAYG and super compliance side of things. I've heard in the last 9 months 3 stories of businesses who set up as companies, who are small operators. They go into liquidation, they sell their business to someone that they happen to know, and by going into liquidation they get out of a range of issues around compliance and having to pay things. And now if I've heard that 3 times in 9 months, I can only imagine how often it happens. And at the end of the day, you know, people aren't getting paid their wages or their super, and the GST isn't getting paid, and, you know, ultimately it's theft, and it isn't. I don't know why it isn't seen that way in hospitality. I find it intriguing.
Intriguing's the word. You've done so many different things, Catherine. How do you compare hospitality to all your other careers?
Oh, it's hard to say. I'm still, 9 months in and a new business, and I'm exhausted. Look, it's social. I feel like, what we're doing is trying to build a place where people have fun, which is not to be undervalued, I think. Yesterday we launched, a regular poetry reading session in our bar, and it was lovely to see, and people had a great time, and I felt really good about that. That's a space that people can do that kind of thing in. The hours are weird, and some customers can be demanding, but I think I enjoy being physical in my work. I mean, I gave up a life behind a computer screen to be a swim coach, and so I was over that kind of work. And so for me, I think it's a good match at the moment. But yeah, in terms of a real comparison, I think it's early days for me yet.
And do you have more of a sense of the importance and value of hospitality in society more broadly?
Yes and no. I mean, being Alli's mum and watching her work and how hard she worked, and how good she was at her various roles over her sort of career is sort of, I think I was always sort of aware of it because it was always part of her, so it was always part of my life. But yeah, I think what I didn't understand is for a proportion of people having somewhere they go regularly and being treated with respect and having a chat is actually something that they really value and is really important to them. I have never been one of those people. Interestingly enough, I like to go for a drink and things, but I'm not a regular or a local person. I flit around and go to different spots, and I have found that really interesting. And I actually, being behind the bar, have found that I am actually enjoying when those people come in and the chats and the conversations that you have. And I think the value in that I had never seen before.
Wow, I think that's really powerful and interesting because, I think for people who need that space or value that space, it's really like it's life-changing. It's if they don't have it, their days and the weeks and months are much worse. So I think, to be able to offer that is really important. And also, as you say, fun is not to be undervalued.
And look, it's a symbiotic relationship. Your regulars keep your lights on, right? And so, we value them probably more than they value us in some ways, to be honest. But it's great. It's for me, that's been really eye-opening.
I love it. Well, Catherine, I think you've brought such an interesting perspective to the podcast, and I really value your time and your insights, and definitely wish you all the best at We3. The staying in the black and keeping Marrickville watered. Really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot.
This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinenat deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.